that when it comes to family, no one takes family for granted. The old adage, you get what you put in, you take out what you put in, is true about family as well. For that reason, when it says that the humans are like a tree, so what allows a tree to flourish? You need to have important ingredients. You have to have nourishing nutrients, you have to have the abundance of water, you have to have warm sunlight. But what we said is that if somebody doesn't plant, or if they plant and they don't work on it, then it can grow as a crooked tree or as a weed. It has no substance, it has no meaning. If it's so with a plant, how much more so it's with family. So before we go on, I'd like to ask, and people that are listening on Zoom can either chat, talk, or whatever you want to do, but I would like to ask the question, what kind of attitudes or behaviors and values do you think can sustain and fortify harmony within a family? Anyone have any ideas? I'm actually going to turn it around, and I'm going to ask a question. Why is it important to have harmony in family?
So many reasons.
What?
So many reasons.
So many what?
Reasons.
That's not we're not asking why you should have children. We're asking why is family so important? So this is a very serious question, and we know that in Judaism, the idea of family is very important. We also know, if you take, for instance, the holiday of Passover, which we're reading about now in the Torah, we read about in the Torah the last few weeks. One of the commandments that God repeats again is that you shall recite to your children. That's why the Seder is a family event. Why is that so important? Is it just to pass on traditions? What is it about a family? And why is it so important? And what does it take to make a family strong? Now, before we go into the class, I will tell you a lot of the material, not all the material, but a lot of the material that we're going to cover today was from the Rebbe's talks in 1974. And I remember it distinctly because I was a student then in France. And when the Rebbe would speak during the weekdays at the special occasions, which was not every day or every week, we were able to hear it by telephone hookup. And I remember that the talks that we're going to examine today, a lot of them were given then, and it made a very profound impression on me, to the point where it has shaped my view of where we are today, and you will see how it unfolds throughout the class. Now, some people say that the reason that Rebbe spoke about family unity is because he was troubled about what was going on then. My claim is that he was actually talking to the future, because family unit today is very, very challenged, as we're soon going to see. So let's first look at a text inside and see nurturing a family is not just about give and take, and it's not just about love, and it's not just about respect, and it's not just about giving children the best education. There is so much more to it. And families need to have a foundation. And one of the things that I will share with you is that when young couples come to me before marriage and they ask me to officiate, I generally ask them the question, what is your mission statement? And they said, we're not running a business. So I said, if for a business which is just material, even though it's very holy according to last week, you invest all your time and energy and effort to develop a mission statement, how much more so when it comes to family? That the family needs to have a mission statement. You need to have a cause that you're living for. You, as a couple, then if you have children, children, if you have siblings, siblings, but there has to be a reason what this is all about. So we're going to see a few things tonight, and I'm going to try to guide you through it because it's something which is very close to my heart. So turn to page 31. We're going to go to text number 1. This is a response from the Rebbe. I don't think the date is correct, I think it was the 23rd of Av, because the 22nd was on Shabbat, they say. I received some information about the relationship at home, but I do not know to what extent it reflects the actual situation. Hence, I want to convey to you some thoughts in light of what the relationship should be according to the Shulchan Aruch. What is the Shulchan Aruch? Shulchan Aruch is the Hebrew word for the code of Jewish law, which is the Jew's practical guide to life. If the relationship is indeed in keeping with it, the purpose of this letter will be to strengthen and deepen it, and there is always room for improvement in all matters of goodness and holiness, Torah and mitzvah. If, on the other hand, it is not quite what it should be, I trust that since the Torah is surely a lamp unto your feet, which I'll explain in a moment, you will bring it to the desired level, and you will do it with joy and gladness of heart. Well, let me talk about this for a moment. If somebody is seeking to improve their health, they will go to a health professional and get examined and get guidance. Now, the concept of the guidance might be the same. The physician or the health official will say, you need to eat healthy and you need to exercise so that you can be fit. Now, is there a difference if the health professional says it to an overweight person or someone that's not overweight? Absolutely not. It applies to everybody. To someone that's overweight, their goal is to lose weight and to be able to become more fit. But someone that's not overweight, they also have to be able to live a life that's fit, a life that's meaningful, a life that's full of vigor and zest. So when the Rebbe was writing to people, he didn't want to necessarily, in all cases, sort of zing in and say, I know your problem. Sometimes he would say it in generalities and sometimes not. But one of the things that we find over here is that for a Jewish family, the code of Jewish law becomes the basis of the family life. And then he says another thing, and we'll talk about that soon. Right now, we're just talking about the fact. We'll soon explain it. And then he uses the term that's taken out of Psalms, Ner liraglai. Ner means a candle. Liraglai means to my feet. What does it mean, Ner liraglai? So in the olden days where there were no lights and you were walking outside and you wanted to walk down a path, what did they do? They used to put little lanterns along the path so you know where you're walking. So the path was illuminated. So it was called a light to the feet. It was really a light to the head and to the eyes, but it meant that your feet are walking in a straight path, in a proper path, and you're not going to hit some sort of obstacle which is going to make you trip and fall. So the same thing is what he's saying here, that if your life is based on the Jewish values and the Torah and the mitzvot, that will act and serve as a light for you, so you'll be able to walk in a proper path. Even when you face challenges, you will have the clarity of vision of where you need to go. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is text number 2 on page 33, which is also very important, and that's from the talk that the Rebbe gave in 1974. It was in February. And this talk will be parsed as we're going to see different pieces of it. The Rebbe says the following: one of the elements crucial for any nation, especially the Jewish people, is the preservation of the family unit. Unfortunately, this institution has been utterly neglected, and the Rebbe is saying it in 1974. The focus on the family unit is lacking somewhat or significantly, even amongst those who genuinely try to follow a Torah lifestyle. They set aside time for Torah study, fulfill mitzvahs meticulously, and even act with self-sacrifice to influence Jews who are spiritually disengaged. Yet the father, mother, and children are walking a single path, the path of Torah, of mitzvot. Nevertheless, they do not walk this path as a family. We readily observe the regrettable effects of the father, mother's, sons, and daughters living in 4 distinct worlds. This was a very powerful talk. I remember it then, and what I did was in preparation for the class, I reread the entire talk again. And what the Rebbe says over there, you can even have a family that's very religious. The father prays in one synagogue, the mother in another synagogue, the boy goes to one One school, the girl goes to another school, and each one is going down the path of Torah mitzvahs, which means that they're going a proper path, but they're not doing it as a family unit. And if they're not doing it as a family unit, there's a disconnect. What's the disconnect? So let's talk about this for a second. A non-cohesive family unit. When you can have people living in the same house, but they all have their own interests, and the only reason that they're together is because they're blood relatives, and they share one roof. But each one has their own agenda. Each one has their own life. What does that cause? It causes loneliness. Now, before I go on, I want to say that actually in today's times, it's more pronounced than ever before. And that is because there is something which is called technology, as we're soon going to see. So even though we bring it up later, I want to bring it up now as well. Technology is a wonderful invention. Give a look right now. We have a whole bunch of people that couldn't make it in this room with all of you that are here. There are equal amount of people on Zoom that are listening, and that is wonderful. But it's a tool through which we should connect. The problem is that it has also become a tool which disconnects. So you can have people sitting in the same room. Each one is on their smartphone. Each one is reading an article of their interest. Each one is texting to some friend somewhere else, and they're not there. I remember there was a story of a husband and wife sitting in the same living room. The wife was in her chair, the husband was on the couch, and she was listening with her earpods, and he was trying to get her attention. And he couldn't get her attention, so he texted her right in the same room. He says, honey, I need to talk to you. And she looks up. Well, you're right here. So in other words, we become so absorbed in our technology that we're doing that we don't even realize that we're part of a unit. And what happens is what they have discovered today, and there are many articles that are being written by professionals today in many respectable newspapers, that one of the biggest plagues that our generation has is loneliness. And you would ask a question, loneliness? People have thousands of friends on Facebook. People are tweeting each other. People have WhatsApp. They're always connected. So why are you lonely? Because that's not really a relationship. So a family cohesive unit is that not only can they depend on each other, they feel each other. They're always there for each other. But if the family becomes non-cohesive, then you have loneliness. Another thing is it can lead to conflict. Because if everyone has their own interest, so their ego gets involved, and their ego gets involved, they believe that their way has to be the right way, so there could be a conflict. And unfortunately, we have all seen, and especially I can see from the perch that I've been, family feuds from sibling rivalry. And I'm not talking about little 5-year-olds or teenagers. I'm talking about people that are already accomplished in life, and the family rivalry is unbelievable. It could lead to resentment, and that is the worst. They give each other silent treatment, and then as a family, they don't transmit the values. Remember, I talked about Passover. The whole idea of Pesach is that we are transmitting values to the kids. And what we're going to learn here is that the value of family is so powerful that it actually establishes who we are. We're going to get there in a minute. So what causes the family erosion, that we shouldn't have the cohesiveness? So first of all, we live in the me generation. What have you done for me lately? Even though it started as a song. What am I getting out of it? People say, okay, if I'm going to invest in a business, how much am I going to earn from it? I invest in a relationship, what am I going to get out of it? So if it's all about individual personal fulfillment, then it's a non-starter from the beginning, because then your emphasis is on yourself. And that becomes a problem. There's also, before we go to technology, there's something which is called individualism. Individualism is a good thing. And actually, at the very end of the class, we will show how individualism is very important, but it's only important in the context of a community. But if individualism is a virtue in its own, that I want to be my own individual and you don't care what's going to happen around you, that creates selfishness, that creates a feeling of being an ingrate, a sense of being an ingrate, and not being aware of how one's behavior is actually affecting other people, even if it's in the name of individual growth. Another obstacle for family cohesiveness is what I mentioned before, and that is technology. And listen, we in Chabad, technology is huge. We're able to connect people all over the world through technology. But technology is only a tool through which we can accomplish, but it's not a means to itself. If somebody feels that their life is more fulfilled now that they have the latest model smartphone or the latest computer, then it's a big pity on them, because the computer is only a tool through which they can accomplish things. But if the tool is an end to itself, then it's a problem. And that's what's happened today. Today, we're so addicted to the technology that what happens is that we feel a half a person if we don't have the smartphone. I forgot my phone. I can't live. I have all my messages and I have my whole life in it. Your whole life is in you. It's not in the phone. Even the phone helps you, but there's so much more to you. We can't become dependent on that. What happens is that it doesn't allow us to communicate. And how many times you talk to your spouse or you talk to your friend? Yeah, I'm listening, but they're reading something else at the same time. We cannot truly multitask. It's either you're giving your full undivided attention or not. Because if you're listening with a half a brain, then you're only experiencing with a half a brain, and then it's meaningless. And people are very aware whether you're truly giving them their attention or not. You know, I'm on a lot of conference calls, and one of the things that some of the groups that I'm on have insisted is that we should have Zoom calls. Because when you have a Zoom, you can immediately see if they're looking at their computer or they're looking at you. Because the interaction of eyes looking together at each other is part of the communication. Now, I'm not saying blind people can't communicate, but their other senses are so much more sensitive that they can pick up nuances that people that have vision can't. But basically, what we're talking about is that even though technology is a wonderful gift and we endorse it, but it presents a challenge as well of family erosion. Now, there's another thing as well, and that is some people call it motherhood, but I would say it's something else. They did a study um, in the 70s, and they found that families that have dinner together at least 5 nights a week, the children are much less likely to smoke or take alcohol or drugs. If they do it less than that, let's say 2 or 3 times, there's more of a chance for them to take alcohol, to consume alcohol or tobacco products or take drugs, because they're feeling that there's something missing. I can tell you my own personal story. My father, anyone that knew him, knew that he was one of the Rebbe's secretaries, and his schedule was till 1 o'clock in the morning, and then he would come home and work till 3, get up early in the morning, give us breakfast, and run back to the office. This was every day except Friday night. The way he was busy was beyond, but he had one thing that he never gave up. Every evening, he would come home from 6 to 7 and have dinner with us, from 6 till 7:30. That he didn't give up any time. He always had dinner with us. And we always sat around the table. He would talk. And I could never understand, but later I understood it. And I know how busy he was. But it was something that was very important. We also had chores. Every night it was one of us, our responsibilities to clean up. But the idea of being together as a family has a tremendous value. So what I've told you until now is not Jewish. This is just very normal. Now I want to go into the concept of what the Rebbe brought out, why the family unit is so important. So first we're going to see how the Rebbe cherished the family and why the blessing of having children that are walking in your ways and have the values are even more important. We're going to watch a video. The rabbi that's speaking here is a rabbi that is a teacher. He's called a mashpia. He's an influencer and a teacher of Hasidic philosophy in Montreal, Canada. His parents were from the old country, and they were very successful in business, and they lived in Brooklyn. So let's listen to his story.
Rabbi Yitzhak Meir Gurari is mashpia of the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in Montreal. His father, Rabbi Zalman Gurari, was a devoted chassid and a financial supporter of the Rebbe's work.
In a certain time, there was around Tafshi Yutes, my father did business in overseas with big rich people. Rashag, who was in charge of the yeshiva, asked my father that when he goes over there, he should take him along and introduce him to those people who should be able to raise money for the yeshiva. My father says, okay, I'll do it on one condition. If you get the Rebbe to promise me that if we're successful, he'll give me a broche for whatever I ask for him. So he went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, okay, made a deal. So the Itake went with him, and they were very successful. When they came back, so my father told Rashag, so he went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, okay, tell him to come in. Came in, so he asked the Rebbe, what do you want? So the Rebbe asked him, what do you want? I told you, what do you want? My father then had a problem, a big business problem. So I'm proud, I don't know myself what. He needed a nest. And he wanted the Rebbe to give him a broche that he should have this nest. So the Rebbe said, you have a chance to ausbetten alles, was du willst. Die erste Sache bet man, soll haben Nachas für Kinder. Die Kinder sollen sein, fromme Kinder sollen auswachsen, so wie der Rebbe will. So my father says, I was so better this. I says, okay, take him a broche. I don't know if he gave him a broche for the business deal, that I don't know, but my father repeated this very often. I do remember sometimes, I don't know if it's transcribed, but I have such a recollection, that the Rebbe once by Fabrengen mentioned that the Nusach HaBroche, Bona Chayim Zoyne Reviche, that he uses. The Rebbe uses very often a broche, Bona Chayim Zoyne Reviche. So it's with a diuk tafke, because Bonne, Nachas von children, is much more important than even Gesund. And Panosa is the third.
The Rebbetzin loved the Rebbe with all her heart. I mean, the Rebbe loved the Rebbetzin with all his heart. He always showed great concern for her. And he was always telling me, please go after this visit immediately to the Rebbetzin to reassure her that things are okay, because she's always so worried. And vice versa, the Rebbetzin just had such a great admiration and respect for her, man. The Rebbe cherished his private tea party with the Rebbetzin. The Rebbe said that he equates the importance of the tea party with his wife on a daily basis with the necessity to put on tefillin.
Sase manies? E for a Maria ou sim?
La prochaine avenue, comme postpone.
Ça, c'est mon directeur en Suisse, à la banque multicommerciale à Genève.
Grosso Batzlar.
Thank you very much. We are always good partners. I am very glad.
Yeah. You can tell him that it is good for the fame of the bank, it is good when they see the director, yes, they happy family life.
See, with the director, very happy family life. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I want to go back to the middle one with Dr. Ira Weiss. I should have given you the little introduction. The Rebbe would go home on an average day at 1 o'clock in the morning, because I told you my father worked for the Rebbe, and at 1 o'clock. I remember as a student in the yeshiva, I used to wait around until my father went home. I was in the office. The Rebbe's wife would call, and at 5 to 1, and asked to speak to the Rebbe, and then 3 or 5 minutes later, the Rebbe would walk out with a work bag full of letters that he was going to use, that he's going to respond. So when he comes back to the office next morning, it's all answered. He had a study that he would work in his house. But the first thing he would do when he would get home, he would sit down with his wife and have a glass of tea together and talk about the day's events. And that's what he called the tea party. It was a party where every day they would discuss things together. And the Rebbe said that time that he spent with his wife having tea, to him was just as important as his morning prayer. So this idea again of the cohesiveness. And in the third scene, what you saw was this banker was starting a new business, and the Rebbe said that in order for him to succeed, he has to have a happy family life. So again, we see that the Rebbe emphasized families. Now we're going to go into the spiritual, mystical aspect of family, and from there we'll take it to the next level. So let's look at text number 3. Before I go to text number 3, let me say the following. We find several times in the Torah that God commanded Moses to take a census of the people and to count. And the question that all the commentaries ask, why did God need to count? God didn't know. Does God need to actually have someone count and report to him how many people there are? If God is God, he knows everything. So he knows exactly how many people there are. So the Medrash addresses it and Rashi brings it down. And Rashi says that because of his affection, he counts them. He gives it an example to someone that has a treasure of precious jewels. So every once in a while, they take it out, they look at it, and they count it. And the counting actually makes it important. It gives significance to it. And we once talked about that something that has numbers, in other words, that it's not by poundage, but it's not by volume, but it's by numbers, by amounts, it doesn't become nullified. Okay, so that's the introduction. But we find something very interesting. Text number 3. When God counted the Jewish people, in addition to the census of the entire nation, equaling 603,550, the Torah emphasizes and repeats that his members were counted according to their families, to the houses of their fathers, meaning that they were counted as family units. What does it mean, the houses of their fathers? So I just need to explain this. In Judaism, the definition of someone as Jewish is dependent on the mother, because the mother gives the life and nurtures the child. But the family, whether you're the tribe of Judah, or the tribe of Levi, or the tribe of Benjamin, that's dependent on the father. So if you're a Kohen, it was not up to the mother, it's up to the father. If you're a Levite, it's up to the father. That's why it's called the house of the fathers, that it was according to the tribes, but it was family units. So what's the Torah trying to say here of families? Because the family unit is the pinnacle of the sanctity. So I'm going to give you a little introduction here as well. If you look at the screen, each one has a screen here, and if you're at home, you're looking at the computer, you will see 4 Hebrew letters. The Yud, after that is a Hey, and after that is a Vav, and after that is a Hey. We all know that these letters in combination spell the unmentionable name of Hashem, of God, which we're not allowed to utter. But it's the name of God, the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. It's the holiest name of God that is found in the Torah. Okay. Now, each letter on its own has a value. It has a meaning. In fact, the letter Yud is so important that according to Jewish law and tradition, every letter that is inscribed in a Torah scroll starts with the Yud. So even if you look at the letter next to it, which is a Hey, it is the Yud in the left northwest corner with which the letter is started. The letter below the Yud is even more apparent because it's a Vav, but it's like a Yud with a straight stem coming down. So the Yud is a very important letter. Yud represents the wisdom of God. Yud, according to Kabbalah, is Chachma, is the wisdom of God. And the wisdom of God is the beginning of the divine revelation in the world, the divine energy that comes. In fact, we know that the first 3 words of the Bible are Bereshit Bara Elokim, right? In the beginning, God created. One of the Aramaic interpreters and commentators on the Bible, Yonatan ben Azil, starts and he says, Bereshit means in the beginning is with Chochmah, with wisdom, because wisdom is the first revelation from the divine. And that is represented by the Yud. Then comes Hey. The Hey is Bina, which is understanding, it's comprehension. So Yud is the right side, Bina is the left side. Yud is the vision, Hey is the analytical aspect, it's the Bina, it's the left side of the brain. According to Kabbalah, the Yud is the masculine and the Hey is the feminine. Furthermore, if I can say, I don't know what she's writing. Furthermore, if I could say something further is that even in the even in the development of a child, of creating a child, so the seed is first a point, which comes from the father. The mother is the one that develops the child into a viable fetus. The same thing is with the intelligence. The chachma is a seed, a spark of wisdom, which is a lightning, but the bina is able to develop it. According to Kabbalah, chachma and bina, which is wisdom and understanding, which is the first two bursts of revelation of divine, are referred to as Abba ve'ima, father and mother. In fact, if you read the Kabbalah of the Arizal, Kabbalat Arizal, Arizal was Rabbi Sokluri, the father of Kabbalah who lived in Sfat. So whenever he wrote about the two faculties, Chachma and Bina, he wrote Abba ve'ima. You see all the places Abba ve'ima. So it's Chachma and Bina. So why is this important? So let's give a look in text number 4. The Torah's mystical teachings strongly emphasize the importance of the family unit. The minimum requirement to fulfill the mitzvah, be fruitful and multiply, is to give birth to a son and a daughter. This is according to the Talmud. It says that in the Torah, God said to Adam and Eve, Pru'revu, be fruitful and multiply. So the Talmud says, what is fruitful and multiply? A son and a daughter. Now, not everybody has sons and not everybody has daughters. The joke in my family is my mother is one of 7 daughters. She's the second of 7 daughters. I remember telling it to some people, and there were no sons, no brothers, only daughters. So I said, my grandfather had 7 daughters. So somebody asked me, was that your maternal or paternal grandpa? Anyways, that's just a little side joke where people don't listen to what you're saying. But he had only 7 daughters. So did he fulfill his mitzvah? Yeah. But we're speaking in general terms. There is the idea of having a male child and a female child, which according to halacha, they don't have to have more children after that if they want to fulfill the mitzvah. If they want to have more, it's a bonus. Kabbalah and Hasidut explain that this is hinted in the name of God, spelled with the letters Yud and Hey, followed by Vav and Hey. The Yud corresponds to the father, because that's Chachma. Remember, that's the Abba. The Hey, the first Hey represents the mother, because that is Bina. The Vav alludes to the male child, and the final Hey to the daughter. Why is the Vav the male child and the Hey is the daughter? So first of all, why are they called children? So this brings us back to the question, why does the Arizal refer to wisdom and understanding as father and mother? So because the Arizal says that the ultimate purpose of the intellectual study is to give birth to emotional feelings. If someone has an intellectual understanding of something and it doesn't lead to an emotional response, then the intellectual exercise is wasted. Because the intellectual is not just for the purpose of knowing. That's why the Rambam, for instance, Maimonides, says that there's the mitzvah of loving God and there's a mitzvah of having awe of God. And he asks the question, how does one come to love God? And he says, through Idbanut, through intellectual contemplation. You have to activate the Chachma and Bina. When you activate the Chachma and Bina and you understand it, you comprehend it, and you internalize it, then you develop a feeling naturally for it. It's like anything in life. If somebody introduces you to a concept and you have no idea what it is, and they'll just say, I love it, it's fantastic, you'll say, fine, you love it, what is it to me? But if you study it and then you see the effects, you can get connected to it. So therefore, the idea of Chachma Bina is not just an intellectual male-female attribute, but actually it's apparent. In other words, it acts as something that fathers and mothers and births an emotional feeling. The emotional feelings could be male emotional feelings, feminine, masculine, and feminine. Za, the 6 emotional feelings, which are referred to as the male, and Malchut, which is the kingdom of God, which is the divine presence called the Shekhinah, that is the feminine. So they're called Beinu Bas. Why are they called son and daughter? Because they came about through the unity of the Chachma and Bina. The Chachma and Bina, Abba and Ima, are connected. They have a connection where they become as one, which is called dat, which is the knowledge, and that produces the emotional feeling. So the Rebbe says the vav alludes to the male child, the final hey to the daughter. A family with all four elements, father, mother, daughter, and son, is a complete representation of the divine name. It follows then that just as the four letters of the divine name, when inscribed together as a word, become a unique entity, God's personal name, so the individuals of a family are all fundamentally transformed into a new existence when they become a family unit. I think this last statement is the most powerful statement. We all know that a letter on its own has a tremendous value. If there's one letter missing in a Torah scroll, it makes the Torah invalid. Each letter has a whole big, huge repository of meaning behind it. And there are books on the Hebrew alphabet letter that when you read it and study it, you see the mystical secrets of each letter. It's amazing. But you know what? If each letter is a separate individual letter, it's a standalone, it's fantastic. But it doesn't have the holiness. It doesn't have that level of spirituality until it's combined. Give you an example. Let's say a scribe, going back to the Torah, is writing a Torah scroll and makes a mistake, writes a letter wrong, puts in an extra letter or a mitzvah letter. The Torah is not kosher. What does he do? He takes a razor blade and he scrapes off the letter or the word and rewrites it. What happens if he writes God's name, Yud Ke Vav Ke? Can't erase it. That is called a holy name that is erased, not erasable. And he has to put it away. That's why scribes, when they write a Torah, they don't write the whole Torah on one big parchment, because otherwise they write all 304,000 letters, and then they come almost to the end and they make a mistake. They can't use the entire Torah. But if they make a mistake in one panel, they can at least replace it. So when does these four letters receive that holiness, that they transform themselves into a new entity, which is the name of God, which you can't even pronounce the way it is written? It's only when they're combined. Says the Rebbe that the same thing is true in a family. You can have a man and a woman and a boy and a girl. And it's not only a man and a woman and a boy and a girl. It could be a husband and wife and brothers and sisters and parents or whatever it is. And it applies to any family. Once you become a family and a family unit, you're totally transformed. So even though individually you're great, but collectively you have now become part of something that is much greater than the sum parts. You've become a whole new kind of unit, a holy unit. And that gives us the mystical idea of why a family is so holy. So everything that he's saying until now, to look at the code of Jewish law, to have values, here he's saying something much more. He's saying is that if you want to bring down the name of God into the world, which that is what our whole purpose is, it's through the family unit. Because when you have the family unit, you have a living letter, a living word of God. And he not only stops there, he goes on in text number 5 to actually explain it. It's all of that same talk. And he says the following. In the Torah, God commands Moshe, and he says, tell the Jewish people they should make a sanctuary. They should build me a sanctuary. They should make me a temple, and I should dwell within them. Our sages note the anomaly that the verse says within them. God says, I will dwell within them, within the Jewish people, instead of within the temple. When you say, build me a sanctuary so I can dwell within them, it doesn't make sense. So what's the meaning? This informs us that God wishes to dwell not only in this temple, but within each and every one of us. The temple becomes the conduit through which God dwells within us. In truth, God's dwelling within us is not a secondary objective, but the primary objective of this directive. For if God's primary home was the temple, the Torah should have stated clearly that God would reside within it, while at the same time finding a way to hint at the concept that God also dwells within us. Instead, the reverse is the case. The Torah states openly, I will dwell within them, indicating that this is the primary objective. The opening of the verse, build me a temple, is simply a method through which the primary goal of the dwelling within the Jewish people can be achieved. This is a phenomenal, because you see, as we're soon going to see in Judaism, if you ask the Jewish historian, what was the most sacred building in the Jewish community? What would they say? Now, most people will say, what? Don't be shy. What would most people say? What's the most sacred building in the community? The synagogue. But truth is, the most sacred building in the community is your own home. The synagogue is from where you draw the energy and the holiness, but it has to be in the home. The home is the temple. And I remember that Rebbe made a very big deal about this in the 80s, that everyone should look at their home as a miniature temple. And they should have holy books there, as we're soon going to see where he was going with that. But here is the setting up the framework here. So he says, where is the physical location of God's dwelling amongst us, in a home where father, mother, sister, and brother form a cohesive family unit. The Rebbe then said it wasn't just father and mother, it's any kind of family, a husband and wife that don't have children, or even if somebody lives single, but they feel at home and they become the embodiment of the divine in their home. So this is something which is special. You know, you go to Israel, I'm sure a lot of you have been to Israel, and you want to go to the holiest place. So you go to the wall, the Western Wall. The Western Wall, I don't like to call it the Wailing Wall, because there's the old joke of the guy that came, he couldn't speak Hebrew, and he took a taxi from the airport, and he told the taxi driver, I want to go to the place where everybody cries. He was saying the Wailing Wall, so he took him to the income tax office. Yeah. That's not what the wall is about. It's a place of joy. It's a place of trepidation. It's a place of reverence. It's a place of holiness. And you're standing there and you're saying, this is where the divine presence was. And today you could even walk through the Western Wall tunnel, so to speak, and you can be as close as possible to the Kodesh HaKodashim, the inner sanctuary of God, and people stop there and recite Tehillim. And here, the Rebbe is saying, all of that is fine and good. It is holy. But it wasn't meant as an end. That wasn't where it stopped. That was the purpose of the holiness in the temple, was to bring that holiness into the home. But if you didn't bring the holiness into the home, then the whole holiness in the temple was for naught. So the home is where it all exists, and it exists in the family unit. So each and every one of us can make a dwelling for God. The family unit is God's method of choice for how to change the world for better. So one thing that we see over here is, just like when we talked last week about work, that work is not just a necessary evil in order to earn money and to feed your family and to be able to have what you need. Family is not just to give you the comfort. Family is not just there that you have a place where you can communicate. The family is the expression of the divinity in the world. And this is something which is very, very important. And for that reason, the Rebbe would always say that any activity you do, the ultimate is that it should be felt in the home. This is Rabbi Garari that we saw before. It's his younger brother, who was the
In
Chabad rabbi in
1970,
Buffalo.
Rabbi Nosson Garari and his wife set out on shlichus, establishing the Chabad Student Center at State University of New York, Buffalo.
On the first year after I was already in Buffalo, I went in with my late wife to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave tremendous brachas. Among the things that he said was that there should be a dira b'tachtonim in the city of Buffalo and all the communities around. But the Rebbe ended with his holy words that the nekuda hapnimius from out, which means all the things that he blessed till now, the nekuda hapnimius von out is chsidische nachas von the kinder, which means that the Rebbe made it very clear that the most important thing, he said already, dir b'tachtonim, you would think, what could come after that? He specifically said, But the Nekude Hapnimis von alles is chassidische Nachas von den Kindern.
Okay, now we're going to go into something which is actually counterintuitive. We have two attitudes to family. When you're asked to invest in something, what would be your first question? Your first question is, how risky is it? Second question is, what do I gain from it? And generally, anyone that goes into business knows that if the investment outweighs the dividend, then you stay away from it. However, if the investment produces a great return, then you go into it. So some people look at the relationship of family the same way. So it's not easy being a family person. It takes a lot of effort. Being a family person means that you have chores, you have responsibilities. You come home from a day's work and all of a sudden you have this need and you have that need and you have stuff that you have to do, which we men call the honey-do list and stuff like that. And we say, oh, yeah, I resent it. It's so hard. Why am I doing this? Why am I investing all this? What do I gain from it? The few moments of joy that I have from it, is it worth the effort? But that's only when you look at the family as something that's there to give you satisfaction, to give you happiness, to give you meaning in life. But if you remember that my purpose is about family, God created me to have a family. My purpose is to make a dir b'tachtonim, to make the dwelling place from above below, and it is through the family. Then whatever effort I put in is going to produce the greatest results, because the greatest results is that I'm fulfilling my mission, I'm fulfilling my purpose. So it's a paradigm shift. So I don't look at, oh, I have to take out the trash, or I have to mop the floor, or I have to do this, that, and the other, whatever. I have to sit and learn with the children, and I have to whatever I need to do to invest, because that's what I was created for. And the result is tremendous. It's not what I satisfy myself with, it's the satisfaction of God and the purpose of the entire creation. That kind of paradigm shift is totally different than what generally people look into marriage. People say, why do I get to marry? What do I gain out of marriage? What do I need it for? What do I need the problems? Let me just make an arrangement. And I like it, I'll do it. If I don't, I can always split. Because that kind of attitude is a self-centered attitude. What we're trying to do here is to say there's no such thing as self-centered. Not that there's no such thing as individuality. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's not about self-centered. You didn't choose to come into this world. God chose to bring you into this world. And even if God chose you to bring you into this world through your parents, it was all by divine plan. And therefore, there is something that's expected from you. And if you live in that paradigm, you will be extremely happy. And we see some letters from the Rebbe where the Rebbe spoke to people that were going through hardships, and he emphasized that. Let's give a look, page 38, text 6. I trust it is unnecessary to emphasize to you the length, at length, that the Jewish way of life, together with its customs, etc., is not only very significant in general, but also in every detail and in the very order of things. In other words, every detail of Torah and the order of the way Torah puts it, all of that is a puzzle that makes it right. In light of this, it becomes obvious how important are peace and harmony between husband and wife, since the mitzvah of making peace between husband and wife is counted amongst those mitzvahs whose fruits a Jew enjoys in this world, while the capital remains for the world to come. This is something we say every morning in the morning blessings. These are mentioned right at the beginning of the Siddur, which is the prayer book, together with the morning blessings, which are said even before starting the actual morning prayers. With this approach in mind, it'll prove somewhat easier to understand that even if one party were to be completely in the right, when you're having an argument, or almost completely in the right, while the other party was completely in the wrong, or almost completely in the wrong, it would still be incumbent upon both parties to do everything in their power to restore peace and harmony. What does that mean? Sometimes when we get into an argument and a fight, we get so obsessed with the fight and the argument that we want to win the argument. But in winning the argument, we're actually destroying the family. And a family unit I have to say that, you know, I'm going to stop here for a minute as an example. Right now, there is a very dangerous war taking place in Israel, and the soldiers are fighting there. And one of the things that you will hear when you speak to the soldiers is that the only way they can succeed in battle, of course, is with the help of God, is teamwork. They have to work as a team. We have a friend here at Diamonds Direct, Dovey, who was in the special forces in Israel. And they used to be a team of six. And he said something very interesting. Each one of us had our own task, but each one of us was dependent on the other. The only way we could succeed and we were put into life threatening situations which were dangerous to our very existence, that everybody did the utmost in what they had to do, but in unison and in concert with everyone else. If one of us slacked, the whole mission would fail. But yet, even though we had our individual mission, we felt part of a team. This is the way it is in marriage as well. This is the way it's in relationships in general. And that's what the Rebbe is saying here. So it's not about who's right and who's wrong, and I want to stop and I want to win the argument. That's not what it's about. It's about the mission of life together. As to the situation itself, namely who's right and who's wrong, I cannot, of course, go into this, nor is it necessary in light of what I've said above. For the important thing, as already stated, is to strengthen the family ties, this being the overriding consideration. However, it would be well if you could find a mutual friend before both of you can unburden yourselves in a frank exchange of grievance. It is possible that an outsider who at the same time is a friend might see more objectively and find the best way to straighten things out, and in the soonest possible time, so once again, peace and harmony may reign in the home. It's interesting that in this particular case, that Rebbe didn't send him to a therapist, because he must have believed that the problem wasn't as severe that it needs to have therapy. And sometimes what happens in therapy is that we become so obsessed with our needs that we don't think about the unit. And the Rebbe was here trying to emphasize that the unit is important, and he obviously didn't feel that the problem is as important, that all you need is someone from the outside that loves both of them, that can see it for what it is and help them through it. So again, when we see this, we recognize that a family is not only an instrument through which to bring godliness in the house, but it has to be a cohesive family where we work together. One other text, then we're going to go to some of the advice pieces. And I think some of the fascinating things that happened in the 70s, which revolutionized the way Judaism was practiced in the United States and the world over. We'll get to there in a minute. So page 40, text 7. Our Torah teaches us that as water reflects a face, so does one heart respond to another. This is from Proverbs. This is before the day that they had mirrors. So if they wanted to see, they wanted to put on makeup in the morning, you would run out to the pond and look and try to see your face. But when you look at a face, the face you put to the water, that's the face you get back. So King Solomon is saying the same thing is true with people, with friends. If you put a kind face to a friend, you will get a reciprocal kind face. I see from your letter that you're willing to do everything that depends on you, that there should be shalom bayit. What is shalom bayit? Peace in the house. Peace and harmony in the home. And as a practical businessman, you're surely implementing this in actual practice. I am therefore confident that the above quotation from the Torah will be fulfilled in the present case. In other words, be kind to your wife, show a smiling face. I want to take advantage of this opportunity, since you have written to me, to emphasize again the enormous importance of Shalom Bayit. So much so that our Torah which is called the Torah Emes, the Torah of truth, is because it presents the truth. And it says that when a husband and wife are worthy, the Shekhinah, the divine providence, abides amongst them. What does it mean when a husband and wife are worthy? So if you look in the Talmud, you look in Rashi. Rashi was the famous French commentator on the Torah, and he says it means that there's loyalty between the husband and wife. When there's loyalty between the husband and wife, then there's the Shekhinah. And I want to stop one more thing. Actually, Nachmanides writes furthermore that a couple, when they're engaged in family relations, which you know what I mean, under the covers, they have to be face-to-face focused on each other, and they're not permitted to have the image of anyone else in their mind at the time. The focus has to be totally on each other with total love and total connection and total unity, which this is very much in line with what the Rebbe is saying over here about the idea of family unity. It is one unit and how that brings the Shekhinah. And the Ramban says there that only through that do you have the Shekhinah. And he says something very interesting. He says, how do you spell man in Hebrew? Ish, Aleph, Yud, Eish, right? Ish. A man is a Ish. How do you say woman? Isha. Now, both the male and the female have two letters that are the same. Aleph, Shin, Aleph, Shin. The difference is that the man has the Yud. Remember we said before that the male is represented by the Yud and the female is represented by the Hey. Remember we learned that before about the unit of the Yud Hey? That's why the Ish has the Yud, the man has the Yud, and the woman has the Isha. Take the Yud and the Hey out, which is the divine presence. What do you have? Aleph Shin, Aleph Shin. What is Aleph Shin and Aleph Shin? Aish is fire. You have fire and fire. We're not talking about the fire of passion. We're talking about the fire which is like a forest fire that destroys everything. So the idea is that when does a Aish become an Ish or a Aish become an Isha? That they have the Shekhinah when they have the total love and focus on each other. Obviously, every effort is worthwhile to ensure God's presence in the home with all that it means in terms of his blessings materially and spiritually. Hence, even when one thinks that he's 100% right, it pays to conciliate for the sake of peace and especially for the sake of the abiding Shekhinah as above. There's also the assurance now, the Rebbe knew his customers. Takes a lot of hard work. Nothing that's good comes easy. So he says, you'll be guaranteed what the sages said in the Talmud Megillah, put effort into it, which means try hard, and you will succeed. V'yagata u'matzata. I have to say to you that I had that answer as well when I was a single student. I had some struggles. I wrote to the Rebbe. I was in Israel, and the Rebbe wrote me back a letter, and in his handwriting he wrote, with the blessing that it should be fulfilled by him, which means by me, the promise of our sages of blessed memory, that you will put effort into it and you will find it. And from that moment, I knew that my life is going to be successful on one condition, if I put effort into it. It ain't going to happen by itself. It's going to come through hard effort and hard work. So this is what the Rebbe says here. It's going to happen. So what do we learn from this? That the Torah's model is that there should be a willingness to invest because you know this is the mission of God. Sometimes you have to conciliate. Compromise is not the word. And you have to you should take the first step of reconciliation and you have to make things work. So now we're going to come to practical suggestions. Now, the next piece that we're going to study, I never put it into the context just of family unity, because I remember when the Rebbe said it, even though I was in France listening to the hookah, but it had I was listening to the broadcast, it had a very, very powerful impact on me. And the reason is because the family can become so disenfranchised. And the Rebbe said, take one night of the week, which night should it be? Friday night. And make that the family night, and you're all together around the table. And he's going to say it soon. And in Jewish homes, it's especially true because we don't use electronics on Shabbos or on Friday night. So when you come to the table, you're not bringing your phone, you're not watching television, there are no distractions. You are together, and there's nothing, it's like being on an island, and there's no communication, there's no telephones, there are no strangers, it's just you, or if you have guests, you and your guest. This happens magically every Friday night and Shabbat. And when you have that kind of focus, it allows you to re-channel and recalibrate your mission. See how the Rebbe says it. One solution for this challenge, which challenge was he talking about? The discombobulated and disenfranchised families that are disconnected. So one solution to this challenge is to emphasize something that is already important for other reasons. Effort should be made to ensure that all family members come together, beginning with Friday evening and especially on Friday night when the Shabbat meal is served. Parents and children should gather in the same room around the same table, engaging in conversation, fitting for Shabbat. On Shabbat, it's easier for the family to unite because family members aren't engaged in their weekday endeavors. The Rebbe said it in 1974, before we had the smartphones and computers at our desktops. But there were other distractions. When the family nurtures this unity on Shabbat, it will experience unity throughout the week. The factor that unites them, cultivated during the Shabbat meal, will prevail over the differing focus areas so that differences only complement each other. This idea of the differences complementing each other is very important. I'll get back to it in a minute. Achieving such unity within the family is not likely to occur spontaneously because the importance of the family unit has been overlooked for several years. We must acknowledge that this area demands dedicated attention and effort. Fortunately, the Talmud assures us that diligent work will yield positive results. So what is he saying here? In 1974, he was looking into the future, and he saw where the Jewish family was going. And he saw that everybody has their own interests, and there will not be that cohesive unit which will allow that the divine presence should be brought into the world. And it's going to be counterproductive to what God intended. So he said, since Friday night is anyways a time that you have to be together, you can actually utilize it to make it a family night. The Rebbe emphasized this even for Shabbat day, and he said, even though you have a meal, Shabbat at the synagogue together, which he strongly encouraged, but I remember reading a letter that he wrote to the Chabad Hasidim in Kfar Chabad, Israel. They had a tendency that they would have a meal together in the shul, then they would have a fabrengen and stay there together till Havdalah. And the Rebbe wrote him a letter and said, that's not the way you should conduct yourself. After the Kiddush, after the meal, go home, be with your family, and ignite the family. So it's not enough just Friday night, but use Shabbat as well. That was a private letter that he wrote to the people in Kfar Chabad. Here the Rebbe was pushing the Friday night dinner as a starting point through which the family can get together. It's quality time. There's unifying discussions. There are no technological distractions. So what's the meaning of that? The meaning of that is the insight that the Rebbe had in the importance of the family unit and how it could be accomplished on a Friday night. And I have to tell you, speaking to people today who are either in college, young professionals, or people that have memories, and I ask them, what are the best memories that you have from your family? And they say it's the Friday night together, the Friday night dinners, the discussions that we had, the stories we heard. It left such an impact on them. Because of the prohibition of the distractions and the need to focus together, it was such a rewarding time. And I can tell you personally, we always had guests in my parents' house. But I know my father, as busy as he was, Friday night was always story time. And one time he received a handwritten book from Russia, written in Yiddish, by someone that came out and said, my grandfather wrote stories of the past. And he gave it as a gift to my father. And every Friday night, my father would read one of those stories and we would talk about it. It became the conversation piece for the whole family. And it was just like, it had the effect of the unity that was always there. I even meet people that were guests at my parents' house, and they live in different places now. Many of them are much older than I am. And they say, we remember the Friday nights at your parents' house. So my father would sit at the head of the table. My mother would sit here, and my brother and I would sit on each side, and our sisters would sit around, and then the guests would sit around. And they said what they learned then and what they saw was this cohesiveness of the family that was just amazing. So I'm saying that was what the Rebbe wanted, that it brings out something which is tremendous. Now we're going to cover one other thing, and this is important because every piece here is important. I want to talk about this statement and see how it connects to the next thing. This is very important about families as well, because family relationships, if it's built on self-need, then it won't last. But if it's built on purpose and on a mission from God, then it lasts. So this brings us to a question. How do you fuse opposites? You have people, male and females are opposites, brothers and sisters. We always know brothers and sisters. Anyone that had a sister or a brother knows that when we were growing up, we were out at each other's throats, always fighting with each other. So the Rebbe said something very interesting. He said, really, the question is, how can the soul and the body coexist? The soul is a spiritual, divine entity. The body is a very physical. We'll give a look at the first human being, the Adam. The body came from the earth, which is the most coarse material out there, and the soul was from the breath of God, which is the most spiritual thing. So one of the things that is the task of the Jew is to bring harmony between the body and the soul. And the harmony between the body and the soul doesn't mean just that the body is subservient to the soul and becomes suppressed by the soul, but rather that the soul and the body recognize the value and they work together as a team. That's everything that is in Judaism. Judaism speaks about not negating the body, but also not making the body the most important, making the soul the most important. So we figured out a way how the soul is the most important, but yet how the body is able to express the beauty of the soul. And we've talked about that in the Kabbalah class that we had in the past. But what we're saying here, what the Rebbe is saying over here, is that when there's peace between the body and the soul, this peace between each of us, the spouses, siblings, also becomes better. Why? What's the problem? Because one of the things we'll talk about is that a family is a point of connection. And I think that the scribble on the front, on the top, is supposed to represent a thread. There's a thread that is a common thread that binds us together. Now, any kind of human relationship needs to have connection points. And in a family, the connection points are the fact that we're rooted from the same set of parents, or if we adopted children, that they live under one roof, we're all one, we have goals, we have hobbies, and we have a good relationship. Now the question is, what is the relationship based on? Is the relationship based on my needs being met, or is the relationship based on shared values and on a mission? If the relationship is based on my needs, as long as you meet my needs, I'm going to be good with you. Take a teenager today. Okay, in our days, we looked at what it says in the Torah, right? Ask your elders, and they will teach you. They will tell you the stories of life. Today, what teenager needs the elders? They pull out their computer or their smartphone, and they go to Google. Any question I have, Google is going to have an answer. I don't need my parents. Google, my parents don't even know how to operate Google. They're so from the past. What do I need them for? So they lose respect for their parents. I have a need, money. I'll get myself a little job. I'll do some stuff. And what do I need them for? And in fact, they don't know anything that I know. We don't live in the same world. They don't understand our slang. They don't understand our language. So what do we need each other? So when you have that kind of attitude, of course, there's no generation. There's no relationship between the generations, and you have a generational gap. But if you're there for a common purpose and you realize that there's something much holier, I remember there was a businessman here. Some of you remember him. His name was Jerry Maddens. You remember Jerry Maddens? He had a textile company in Salisbury. So one time he said, I want to go to New York with you to the Rebbe's Fabrengen. The Rebbe's gathering, it was for a special holiday, and there were thousands of people there. And he wanted to fit in. He knew we all had black hats, so he brought his cowboy hat. That was the big mistake. Actually, it wasn't a mistake because they had TV cameras there because they were broadcasting it live. And he was the only one wearing a cowboy hat. He thought he would blend in, and he stood out. So they were constantly panning in on him. But I remember one of the comments he made to me later was that he'd never been in a place where young and old all blended together with one common cause. And you couldn't distinguish between the elders and the young. They were all there. whether they were singing together, listening together, praying together, it was all one unit. Why? Because it wasn't about what I need and what I get. Everybody realized that they're there for a common purpose, and the elders can give them the experience which you don't have. You give a look at Hasidic paintings in Chabad. Chabad, the Hasidic paintings are not about dancing. You will see an elder Chassid sitting by the table, and there's a little cup of l'chaim, and you see people all around him, young and old, trying to hear a word from him. This is the meaning that I'm saying, that when you have a Torah value that becomes your basis and God becomes your basis, it's a whole different unit. And this is what we're talking about, the thread. If it's just about our needs, what if the needs clash? If you say that it is all based on common ground, what if we don't share interests anymore? But if it's a Torah foundation, then there's a common thread that runs through every aspect of our life. Now, please open up to page 46, because remember we mentioned before that the family and the home is where the divine presence is more than the synagogue. There's no question that in the early 70s, and when the Rebbe was giving these talks, he saw that there were many young Jews that were being disenfranchised from Judaism. Any of you that lived in New York, when I lived in New York in the 60s, what was the most common thing? The hippies and then the yippies. And I remember my father was saying, I don't know, when people were poor, they would wear a patch on their pants. Today you go to the store and you buy pants with patches in the beginning before it even tore. I mean, it was a whole different culture, if you remember what was going on. It was called, it was even before the bell bottoms and the polyester. There was all this thing, and kids were not being involved in Judaism, and people were being disenfranchised. And all the rabbis at the time, the Orthodox rabbis, were basically circling the wagons and saying, we're going to lose our kids to attrition. We have to strengthen ourselves and strengthen our community, cut ourselves off from the world, and let's reinforce who we are. And the Rebbe comes out and says, our task is to reach out to all the Jewish people. And the Rebbe started something which nobody understood at the time, and it was called the mitzvah campaign. And the first part of the mitzvah campaign was a 5-point mitzvah campaign. And the 5-point mitzvah campaign was putting on tefillin, having a mezuzah. Later, he introduced Shabbat candles. Later, it turned to 10. And if you examine the common thread of all these mitzvot that the Rebbe introduced, none of them were synagogue related. Not one of them was synagogue related. They could either do at home or they were centered around the home. It was just like an unbelievable thing. And a lot of Orthodox rabbis were criticizing, why are you teaching them that that's what the Torah is? And the Rebbe said, this is the way to bring them in. This is the way that a person can make their home a holy place. I remember in 1974, in the summer, right after this, we started with the mitzvah mobile, which later the Rebbe called it the mitzvah tank. And we went out, and it started on a Sunday morning, and then Monday I was already on, and we went to Manhattan to Broadway. We went to Broadway, a section that was the whitest section of Manhattan at that time, waspy as could be. And there was a deli there owned by a Jewish person. It wasn't kosher. And we had this mitzvah mobile with music, looking for Jews, because in Manhattan you'll find Jews anywhere. He said, come on, put on tefillin, come do a mitzvah. And people started gathering around, and all of a sudden, this guy, this deli owner, runs out with a tray full of soda and potato chips. And he said, I can't bring you sandwiches, it's not kosher. But in all my years on Broadway, never did I believe that there'll be a mobile synagogue asking Jews to come and pray. But that's what it was. It wasn't about the synagogue. It was actually about the home. And the Rebbe's brilliance, what he did was, he said, you can strengthen Judaism at home because that's going to be the answer. It's not about pulling more people into synagogue. Of course, ultimately having people in synagogue is great. But it's in the home strengthening Judaism that you can save the Jewish people. And therefore, all these mitzvahs, if you give a look in figure 2.2, tzedakah, the Rebbe wanted that there should be a tzedakah box in every home. Later, the Rebbe asked that in every kitchen, you should affix a tzedakah box to the wall. So when you're preparing food, you're thinking about the poor. A home filled with Jewish holy books. So when you come into the house and you have holy books, it reminds you You sit down and study a little bit. It gives the home a Jewish character. The mezuzah, of course, the kosher mezuzah on each door, that's another way, which is elevating the home. Torah study, where's the Torah study? In the house. You study Torah in the house with your family, with your friends. Then he wanted the Jewish women and girls should start lighting candles. And as you'll see later, the Rebbe even wanted the children. The Rebbe put a tremendous emphasis that children should have their own tzedakah box. They should have their own prayer book. And even girls, before they get married, should start lighting the candles. And even though many people have the custom that they only start by marriage, the Rebbe said in today's times we need more light. He encouraged girls to do it as well. And then he has started the kosher food campaign and to have kosher kitchens and family purity. This idea of having these mitzvahs at home was to be able to help people establish the Torah value in their home.
In the late 1970s, Charles Ramat had a number of audiences with the Rebbe. During one of these meetings, he asked the Rebbe about something he was struggling with.
I told him, Rebbe, I'm having a crisis of faith. I really do not believe. I love Judaism. I love a lot of the rituals, but for me, they're nostalgic. How do I find true faith and true belief? And it's almost like we had philosophic discussions, but they were the things that were really bothering me more than should I invest in this property or should I invest in that property? And the Rebbe's responses were absolutely deep and incredible. And they were tailor-made to me. It wasn't a system that he said, you have to go into this system and you will be better. He really, I felt, was speaking to what would work for me. And he asked me, do you keep kashrut? And I said, no. Which, by the way, took a lot of guts to sit in front of the Rebbe and say that. It was actually a terrifying moment. But, you know, my relationship was based on total honesty. How could you lie to the Rebbe? He says, do you put on tefillin every day? I said, no. He said, so I'm going to ask you to do one thing. If I ask you to do one thing without any precondition, will you do it? I said, yes. Anything you ask me, I promise you I will do it. He says, will you and your wife agree to light Shabbat candles every Friday night while you're married? I said, done. And we weren't at that point. We have never missed in half a century lighting Shabbat candles. My children, when they grew up, even though they went to secular schools, Friday night and Shabbat, not the day of Shabbat, but Friday night was sacrosanct. Nobody went out. When my kids were teenagers, no parties. I had all kinds of business meetings, dinner invitations, you know, fun things to go do. Friday night is Shabbat, we're home. We never missed lighting the candles. And I would say that simple mitzvah, which is one out of, 500 that I'm not doing, has kept my family on a Jewish path throughout our lives.
Shmuel Abramson works in special education and lives in Monsey, New York. As a college student in the mid-1970s, he decided to reconnect to his Jewish heritage.
When I later transferred out of my school because I became interested in, finding the right path, and at one time I was going to come to yeshiva in Crown Heights, and at the last minute I backed out. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. I ended up going to Yeshiva University. It was there that I met my wife, and my wife had come from a modern Orthodox family, and we started seeing each other and growing together. When we eventually became engaged, we scheduled an appointment with the Rebbe. Now, I didn't know how it worked. I was told, put your name down on a piece of paper, put your mother's name down, that we're just going to give the Rebbe that, and the Rebbe's going to give us a blessing, that's it. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity. So some of the details I don't remember exactly, but I remember that I took two pieces of paper. And one I wrote, I figured that the Gebayim, the secretary, is going to collect one and give it to the Rebbe. But I wrote on another one, Rebbe, I'd like to ask you some questions. We came in, the Rebbe looked at me, the Rebbe looked at the piece of paper, and he said, you'd like to ask me some questions? And the two questions I asked the Rebbe, the first one you have to realize again from where I came from and what I was grew up with. I asked the Rebbe, even though I had in mind more than I had in mind the drug experience of other drugs, but it was capsulized. I asked the Rebbe, I said, I have two questions. One, is marijuana a legitimate means to religious consciousness? Okay. And the second question was, I said, how do I and my Kala achieve compatibility? I said these words, I said, my lifestyle in the past was beyond her wildest nightmares. And how do we achieve compatibility? So the Rebbe looked at me, and then he said, are these your only two questions? And I said, yes. And he gave a big smile, and looked at both of us, and he said, then you're going to be a very happy couple. And when the Rebbe said that, I felt like the whole room breathed a sigh of relief. I felt totally relaxed after that. The smile was a smile that lit up the room. And and by the Rebbe saying that, by the way, that you're going to be a very happy couple, Lian Hara, after 36 years, that's rings true. The Rebbe answered the first question first that I asked, and the second question second. And he said in the realm of the compatibility question, he says, we need to have a common goal. He says, my goal, he said to me, is to strengthen my wife in Torah and mitzvahs. Her goal is to strengthen me in Torah and mitzvahs. And he said, we should learn together. He suggested at that time, because of my lack of background at the time, we should learn Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, he said, and he said he believes that it's in English, we could learn it in English, we should learn together. And he said, then when we take this common goal of fortifying each other, and we have children, we'll be able to communicate and give our goal over to the child in Torah and mitzvahs. And he says all the differences will become dissipated in that common goal.
Mrs. Rachel Fogelman and her husband have been shluchim in Worcester, Massachusetts since 1947.
I would speak, and I organized groups of not women that belonged to the yeshiva, women that were outside of the yeshiva, outside of the fringe of our sphere. And I spoke, and they always asked me to do book reviews. And whenever I did a book review, no matter what the book, I always brought in something about Yiddishkeit and used the book review as a vehicle to speak about Torah and Yiddishkeit and to draw them closer. We went in for Yechidus, and the Rebbe just greeted us so beautifully and so warmly. And my husband mentioned to the Rebbe that the following week I was going to speak at the temple, and I was going to do a book review on The Chosen, Chaim Potok. The Rebbe looked at me, and he looked at me in the way that only the Rebbe could look at someone, with a deep perception, with a knowledgeable, otherworldly perception. And he looked and he said, they're going to listen to you. And then the Rebbe said, speak about Taras HaMishpacha. Well, I was taken aback. I would love to speak about Taras HaMishpacha, but this book, The Chosen, is a book about boys, about the relationship of a son and his father. And I thought, how am I going to bring that and speak about Taras HaMishpacha? But the Rebbe said, speak about Taras HaMishpacha. There was no question. That's what I had to do. When I came to the temple that morning that I had to speak, we met in a room downstairs that the temple people used for their small minyanim, if someone had to say Kaddish or whatever. And the room soon filled up. It filled up so quickly that the chairman of the event, the chair lady, said, well, we'll go upstairs to the main sanctuary. Now, the main sanctuary in the temple is a very large, large room. It must hold about 1,000 people. It's huge. And pretty soon, the room began to fill up and fill up more and more until there was standing room in the back, and women were standing there. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And I started out with a book by Chaim Potok. I described the scene, what it meant. And then I mentioned, did you notice that there are no women in this book? Did you notice that the father's wife is not mentioned? The son's mother is not brought to light? And there's no relationship between men and women. The reason there's no relationship in this book, because to touch upon it would require a book in itself. The relationship between men and women in Jewish life is holy and precious, and it is based on Taras HaMishpacha. And I went on from there, and I explained what Taras HaMishpacha was, what it meant to us, and why it was a flaw in the book and a flaw in most Jewish lives because people are unaware of it. The audience was electrified. People called me up, women called me up, where is the mikveh that you spoke of? It was an old mikveh on the east side that was used by very few women. It was in such a decrepit old building. So what we knew, we needed a new building, and this started a campaign for a new mikveh building. That was how it began, and ultimately we built a mikveh here in Worcester. We have to realize that koiches pnimium, inner strengths that the Eibishter gives us, is what the Rebbe sees in us all the time. And he strengthens us in such a way and directs us in such a way that those koiches pnimium are brought to a fruition, that they have positive and actual results in reality.
We're about to finish, so I just want to bring out one thing before I finish. Number one, there was a piece in the video where the Rebbe said, if you have a common goal in marriage, that'll bring success to the marriage. And this goes back to what I said before about the mission statement. The husband and wife need to know that they have a common spiritual goal, why they're together, why they're building a home, what it means, and what it means if they have children, how it goes through them, and that brings that success. And that's why he told this young man that experimented with drugs, and by the way, the Rebbe was against drug use, that compatibility will come through a common goal. And the reality has shown, and history has shown, that you're going to have people that are different kinds of characters. They have different kinds of interests in other things in life. But if they have a common goal, they're so in love and they're so connected that it's amazing. The other thing that I want to finish with, and we don't have time, so I just want to say it by heart. And this letter that they bring here was something which is very, very important to me. It's towards the end. I'll give you a little of the history of it. There was a fellow by the name of Kaddish Luz. Kaddish Luz, test your knowledge of Israel. Does anyone know who Kaddish Luz was? Come on. He was the speaker of the Knesset in the 50s and the 60s.